Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee for hearing our testimony. This is for House Bill 428, Comprehensive Flood Management Grant Program, Awards for Flood Damage and Mandatory Funding. Please consider a favorable recommendation on this bill. It would provide grant funding to local governments to facilitate the implementation of projects for flood control, to provide for environmental quality of watersheds, to implement capital projects and infrastructure repairs, as well as emergency flood warning systems and property acquisition in flood-prone areas. In July of 2016, Ellicott City experienced what was called a 1,000-year storm, one that dumped 6 inches of rain in 90 minutes on the hills around the historic town, causing a severe flash flood that caused $11 million of damage. What we did not know that it was then that another, even stronger storm would destroy parts of the town a second time less than 24 months later in May of 2018, causing another $27 million of damage. The 2018 storm measured 8.4 inches of rain in Ellicott City and 13 inches of rain in nearby Catonsville in just a few hours. Both storms were caused by training thunderstorms, which is a term that is used not because the storms are practicing, but because the storms follow each other like cars in a train. In these 2 flash floods, we lost 4 lives. Our first responders made 120 swiftwater rescues in 2016 alone, and we were fortunate that shopkeepers and restaurateurs kept their wits about them, guiding patrons to upper floors and higher ground. There were many, many, many stories of heroism and rescues. The frequency of storms that produce these intense periods of rain has increased in recent years, creating flooding in several areas, probably in each of your districts in the state. Frederick, Washington, Cecil, Hartford, Baltimore, Anne Arundel, Prince George's, Montgomery, Baltimore City are just a few of the ones that have been affected. In the past 8 years, there have been 4 designated federal emergency management flood-related disasters in Maryland. That is compared to 1 in the 8 years before that. These 4 disasters created millions and millions of dollars of infrastructure damage, as well as additional costs for emergency management, debris removal, and other expenses. FEMA can reimburse certain types of local government expenses when a disaster is declared, but the remaining costs, as well as costs to fund new capital projects to reduce flooding in vulnerable areas, is borne by local governments. Without assistance from the state, affected towns will have trouble, as Ellicott City has, recovering the economic vitality. When Howard County went for help at the state level for expenses related to these floods, the desire to help was there, but the dedicated funding was not. The Flood Mitigation Grant Fund, which was originally set up in the 1970s just for this purpose, was empty. It had last been funded in 2003. In summary, this bill would mandate that the state appropriate funding in the Flood Mitigation Grant Fund every year so that it's available when needed by local jurisdictions that suffer from catastrophic flooding. This legislation is supported by the Maryland League Conservation Voters, the Maryland Sierra Club, the Maryland Association of Counties, Preservation Maryland, Maryland League of Women Voters, and the Tapsco Heritage Greenway. Unfortunately, what we thought of as 1,000-year storms are becoming a new normal. This legislation would ensure that any jurisdiction affected by severe flooding has a mechanism within the state budget ready and able to assist in the form of an annually funded comprehensive flood management grant program. We ask for your favorable support, and I'd like to introduce County Executive Dr. Calvin Ball.
Welcome, County Executive Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today, and I'm here to ask for your support on House Bill 428. I would also like to thank the lead sponsor and my former colleague, Delegate Courtney Watson, for her leadership on this issue and many others dealing with Ellicott City. As she noted, on July 30th, 2016, Ellicott City, Maryland, a historic mill town established in the late 1700s, was hit by a storm that pounded the town with nearly 6 inches of rain in over 2 hours. This rain resulted in a flash flood that took 3 lives and devastated the area. Following that flood, residents, business owners quickly began rebuilding, and a year later, it was estimated that 90% of our businesses had reopened and more than 70% of our households had returned. A true testament to the resiliency of a community. And at that time, the storm was called a 1 in a 1,000-year event. However, just a mere 22 months later, it happened again, and another life was lost. When destructive weather events strike, aside from the obvious emotional and monetary toll faced by those who are directly impacted, there's a tremendous economic impact and challenge for the county. And as a result of the 2016 flood, Howard County incurred costs of approximately $11 million to repair the damage to Ellicott City. And since the 2018 flood, we've already incurred over $27 million in additional costs for debris removal, infrastructure repairs, and other emergency work. This is money that was largely unbudgeted. And after each of these storms, our county has had to transfer from other priorities funding to do the work that was necessary to keep the businesses and the residents of Ellicott City safe. And while there are some opportunities to receive reimbursements from federal agencies, including the FEMA and Federal Highway Administration, that process can be cumbersome and does not come close to the money for the full cost of the destruction. The legislation you're considering today will be a resource for counties and municipalities across our state that are impacted by severe weather by providing grant funding for infrastructure repair, debris removal, and emergency protection work associated with a flood event. In addition, House Bill 428 will allow impacted jurisdictions to use grant funding for flood control and watershed capital projects aimed at reducing the likelihood of another flood event, as well as for automatic flood warning projects. Due to the nature of severe weather events, emergency managers often only have minutes to alert the public that a flash flood is imminent. Automated flood warning systems such as sirens or voice systems are critical to ensuring that our public has as much notice as possible and can quickly move to safer, higher ground. Our recently announced Ellicott City Safe and Sound Plan, which is a comprehensive flood mitigation and economic recovery plan for Ellicott City, includes the need for additional flood control and watershed capital projects, as well as an emergency alert system. As Howard County executive, the safety of every resident is my most sacred responsibility, which is why I've recently instructed my Office of Emergency Management to purchase 2 temporary speaker arrays that will emit incredibly loud tones when Ellicott City is in danger of flash flooding. These speakers are a temporary solution while we continue to explore a more permanent alert and warning system. In addition to the funding we will provide, if passed, House Bill 428 will be one of the many resources that we would need to pursue for additional funding to assist us. And while Ellicott City has received the bulk of the coverage over the last few years, many other counties, as Delegate Watson has indicated, have experienced flooding, and these events wreak havoc on communities in which they occur, as well as a county and our state as a whole. And while HB 428 will not solve the problem entirely, this grant program would be created, and the legislation will be incredibly helpful for all counties across Maryland dealing with flooding. And for these and many other reasons, I ask for your support for House Bill 428.